John here from Great Lakes Country. On the topic of primitive ways to start a fire out in the wild, a really common technique, or rather device, is to use something called a fire drill. And there's a couple of different kinds. There's the bow drill and there's the fire pump drill, which is what I'm holding right now. In this video, I want to describe how I built my fire pump drill and demonstrate how to use it to make a fire out of basically nothing. So real quick, I'll start by describing the parts of this thing and how it goes together. So basically, this whole thing comes down to a wooden dowel that you're trying to spin pretty quickly because you need to create friction and pressure and speed in order to make heat and then fire. So there's just a couple components, of course, the wooden dowel. Then we've got what I guess I'll call the handle, and it's attached to the top of the dowel through this little hole that's been drilled. Such that when you spiral this up a bit, you can get a sort of spinning action by timing just when to push down and so forth. Of course, I just drilled into the ground, which isn't helping anything. And so all this is a length of paracord run through a hole in the dowel and tied to the bottom of the handle. Then we've got this big old piece down here, which I will call the flywheel. And this adds some weight, so some centrifugal force can keep this thing spinning in between each of the pumps that you're executing on the handle. Now, the way that this actually works to make heat and friction and eventually fire is you need a second little piece of wood. And this is really just a scrap piece of shelf board I had, and I've got a couple of slight modifications made to it. Basically, I drilled a hole just a little bit into the wood that's the same diameter as my dowel. And then this is a very important step. You have to cut a notch out of the side of your piece of wood such that it's kind of leading to that shallow hole that's been drilled. And the reason for all of this is because you need that shallow hole to serve as kind of a place for the tip of the dowel to seat. So it's not just sliding all around as you spin it. You can really focus that in there and get a lot of friction. But if you don't have that notch cut out in the side, no air is going to get in there. You need oxygen to be able to access what you're doing so it can actually feed the little tiny, basically powdered coal or charcoal that you're making when you start with the friction and the movement and the heat. And you're basically just grinding the little tiny bits of wood into that charcoal powder, basically. So I'm going to demonstrate this, and hopefully I can make this work on camera and demonstrate how this thing works. And the reason I'm sitting on the ground to do this is because it's helpful to be able to kind of anchor this piece of wood under one of my feet so it can't slide around while I'm doing this. So I'm just going to get this wound up and start pumping it just about as vigorously as I can while keeping some good downward pressure on it. And I just need to keep doing this. That squealing's annoying, but that means that there's a lot of contact between those pieces of wood. All right, and now it's an old Boy Scout trick. I've got a little bit of dryer lint, and I'm going to see if I can tip this out. Little bits of hot coals, and slowly but surely it has started burning that dryer lint, which is super flammable. That's why it's very important to always empty that out of your dryer lint trap. So I've just got this little pan with some little pine needles and some other dry leaves and things, and I'm just gonna kind of feed that until I got a big enough fire going so I can start putting in some twigs. And obviously from here, I can just keep feeding this and turn it into as big of a fire as I want. Obviously, I wouldn't keep it in this little aluminum pan, just to kind of demo it on camera here and prove the concept. That's gonna work just fine. I would obviously transfer this over to the fire pit before letting it get any bigger than that. So that's the fire pump drill in action. It's pretty simple, and there's a lot of plans for how to make them online. Mine, I just kind of made up as I went because, again, it is pretty simple and just made out of some basic components. Like I said, the paracord is just tied in place. As for my flywheel, a lot of people use a circular piece of wood, but I found it pretty convenient to just make kind of a, what would that be, an octagon out of a piece of 2x6 lumber. Then I just drilled a hole through it and glued it to the dowel, and it's stayed in place ever since. As for what kind of dowel to use, I don't think it matters that much. Some people say that you should definitely use softwood. I think this might actually be a maple dowel, but I know that it works for me, so I don't know. Maybe softwood works a little faster. Either way, I'm fine with however I did this. Now I want to talk about a couple of alternative methods of starting a fire out in the wild that are quite a bit easier and more convenient and maybe a little more technological than the primitive pump drill. The first method uses the exact same principle, except it's just updated a little bit for the modern times. And that is a wooden dowel and a power drill. Let's see if this will work a little faster than the manual version. Well, where there's smoke, there's fire. Yep, I'd say that works. And it's certainly a lot more convenient and a lot less exhausting than using the manual pump drill. Now, the last method, again, a little bit higher tech, a little bit more modern, a little bit more convenient. And once again, it starts with one of those wooden dowels. Piece of cake. Highly recommend the third primitive fire starting method. So that's about it. Obviously, the power drill method was kind of silly, and the third fire starting method was meant to be especially silly. But anyway, the point of this video was really more to discuss and demonstrate the fire pump drill. And it is a little bit of work, and the thing's kind of bulky, and is it really a super useful and prudent device to keep on hand if you're out in the wild and you need to start an emergency fire? I don't know. I think there's all manner of ferro rods and, of course, Bic lighters, which is my go-to fire starter in pretty much all situations. But it's just kind of a fun thing to make and to try and to, you know, kind of proof of concept. It's sort of satisfying to really make a fire from absolutely nothing but friction. So a fun project, but in my opinion, maybe not especially essential or useful when you could just carry a ferro rod or a Bic lighter or any other number of fire starters. That's it for now. Be sure to like and subscribe and stay up to date with all our latest stuff, including future bushcraft and outdoors videos. And consider supporting us on Patreon at patreon.com/Great Lakes Country. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'm John, and this is Great Lakes Country.